Imagine waking up in the middle of a storm, the wind thrashing against the trees, the rain hammering your tent, and hearing someone whisper your name from just beyond the fabric. You know you're not alone, but no one is there. Tonight, I'm sharing 3 true camping horror stories with girlfriends, including encounters like this that will haunt anyone who's ever sought refuge in the woods. These stories are 100% true, verified through public records and witness accounts. Names may be changed to protect privacy, but every terrifying detail really happened. If you enjoy these stories, hit like. It helps more horror lovers like you discover this channel. Comment where you're watching from. You're part of my horror family, and I want to know where my family is tonight. Tell me which story hit you hardest, and don't forget to subscribe. Your subscribe fuels this channel, so we can bring even more real, bone-chilling stories straight to you. We rented the cabin in late October, just before the leaves finished falling off the ridges. It was our 3rd anniversary. 3 years with Mara. She wanted something quiet, somewhere with no signal and no traffic. I found a nearly empty campground tucked deep in the Appalachian mountains, outside a small town called Harmon's Gap. The kind of place with one gas station, a shuttered diner, and fog that never really burns off. The drive up was slow and narrow. The road twisted through hollow valleys and along slopes packed with wet pine needles. Fog sat low between the trees, like smoke that couldn't lift. By the time we reached the ranger station, it was already getting dark. The ranger was older, tired looking. He slid the registration paper across the counter without much conversation. When I mentioned it was our anniversary, he gave a quick nod. "You'll have privacy," he said. "Campground's mostly empty this time of year." Then, almost as an afterthought, he added, "Last couple in that cabin didn't stay the full weekend." I waited for him to elaborate. He didn't. "Why?" Mara asked lightly. He shrugged. Said they changed their mind. That was it. The cabin sat alone near the edge of the woods, about 50 yards from the nearest gravel loop. No other lights visible. Just trees pressing in from all sides and a shallow creek somewhere below the slope, moving slow and unseen. It smelled like wet wood and old fabric when we opened the door. The floorboards sagged slightly near the entrance. A small iron stove sat cold in the corner. There was a narrow bed against the far wall, a square table, and a closet built into the wall near the foot of the bed. The closet door was thin pine, painted once but long since chipped. It looked older than the rest of the cabin. Slightly warped, the knob dull and loose. I don't know why I noticed it right away. Maybe because it felt out of place. We unpacked slowly. Mara lit a few small candles on the table. The power flickered once, then steadied. Outside, wind moved through the trees in long, low breaths. Somewhere in the distance, something rustled through leaves. Probably deer. Everything felt normal, almost too quiet. That night, we lay in bed listening to the mountains settle. The kind of silence that hums in your ears. Occasionally, the cabin would creak, wood adjusting to cold air. It didn't bother me. What bothered me was waking up at exactly 3:02 a.m. I don't know why I remember the time so clearly. My phone was face down on the crate beside the bed. I must have checked it instinctively. 3:02. Mara was gripping my shoulder. "Why were you doing that?" she whispered. Her voice didn't sound scared, just confused. "Doing what?" "You were standing at the closet." I blinked at her. My body felt heavy, like I'd been pulled from deep sleep. I just woke up, I said. She shook her head slowly. No, you got out of bed. You walked over there. I looked toward the closet. The door was closed. I heard you, she continued, voice softer now. You were just standing there, not moving. I asked what you were doing and you didn't answer. A cold pressure built behind my ribs. I didn't get up, I said, and I meant it. She hesitated, searching my face. You climbed back into bed when I touched you. The cabin felt smaller suddenly, the air heavier. I tried to laugh it off. Sleepwalking, maybe. I've never seen you sleepwalk. Neither had I. I didn't remember standing. I didn't remember walking. I didn't remember touching that door. We lay awake after that. I kept staring at the ceiling, listening for something. Movement, breathing, anything. But there was only the creek below and wind in the eaves. Eventually, we drifted back to sleep. In the morning, pale gray light seeped through the single window. The fog outside was thick, pressing against the glass. Mara got up first. A few seconds later, she stopped moving. Did you see this? She asked quietly. I sat up. The closet door was open, just a few inches. I felt a tightness in my throat. No, she stepped aside. The inside of the door, the part that faced inward, had deep scratch marks carved into the wood. Not shallow, not accidental. Long, jagged grooves, multiple layers of them. Like someone had dragged something sharp downward again and again. The wood was splintered where it had been torn. They weren't new. The exposed grain was darker, stained with age. But I knew, with a certainty I can't explain, that those marks hadn't been there the night before. I would have noticed, I'm sure of it. I stepped closer, running my fingers near the grooves without touching them. The closet interior smelled faintly sour, like damp cloth left too long in a sealed box. There was nothing inside, just emptiness. Mara didn't say anything. Neither did I, but something in that cabin felt different now, like it had shifted slightly overnight. And I couldn't shake the feeling that I had too. We should have left that morning. I know that now, but pride does strange things to you. So does embarrassment. I didn't want to be the boyfriend who ruined an anniversary over scratch marks and a half-remembered dream. So we stayed. The fog never lifted that day. It hung low between the trees, swallowing distance. Even the sound of the creek felt muffled, like the whole valley had been wrapped in wet fabric. Mara was quiet during breakfast. I kept catching her looking at me when she thought I wasn't noticing. Do you remember anything? She asked eventually. No? She nodded, but I could tell she didn't fully believe me. Not because she thought I was lying, but because I seemed distant, slower. I felt it too, like part of me was moving through thick mud. Around midday, I stepped outside to clear my head. The ground was slick, leaves pasted into the soil. I walked a slow circle around the cabin. That's when I saw it. Boot prints in the mud. Fresh. They led from the tree line to the cabin wall, directly beneath the small window near the closet. I crouched. The prints were deeper near the wall, as if whoever made them had stood there for a while, looking in. I stood up too fast, heart pounding. I told myself, it could have been the ranger, checking on the property. That made sense. It had to. When I went back inside, I didn't mention it right away. I don't know why. Maybe I didn't want to see fear settle into her face. That night, I barely slept. Every time the cabin creaked, I felt my muscles tighten. Around 2:50 a.m., I forced myself to stay awake. I watched the closet door in the dark, waiting for something I couldn't name. 3:01, 3:02. My vision blurred for a second. Not sleep exactly, more like a lapse, a flicker. Then I was standing, not in bed, standing in front of the closet. My hand was on the knob. I don't remember getting there. My reflection in the darkened window looked wrong. Not distorted, just distant. Like I was watching myself from somewhere slightly behind my own eyes. The closet door was open a crack, and there was a smell. Stronger now, rotten fabric, old sweat, damp earth. Behind me, Mara's voice broke the silence. "What are you doing?" It sounded exactly like the night before. I turned slowly. She was sitting up in bed, eyes wide, voice shaking now. I started, but the word didn't feel connected to me. I looked back into the closet. It was empty, but I had the overwhelming sensation that I wasn't alone in that space. Not physically, more like something had been there. Recently, my hand was trembling on the knob. "I didn't mean to," I said finally, though I wasn't sure what I was apologizing for. She got out of bed and pulled me away from the door. My skin felt cold. That's when we heard it. A slow scrape from outside, not inside the closet, outside the cabin wall, dragging downward. Mara grabbed my arm. Neither of us moved. Another scrape, directly beneath the window. The same height as the scratch marks inside the door. I walked toward the window, slowly, and lifted the curtain just an inch. Fog, trees, nothing else. But the mud beneath the window had been disturbed again. The next morning, we packed without speaking much. Before we left, I opened the closet one last time. The scratch marks looked deeper. Or maybe I just hadn't seen them clearly before. On the back wall of the closet, near the floor, there was something I hadn't noticed. A faint indentation in the wood paneling. Almost like a small hatch outline. It was subtle, easy to miss. I didn't try to open it. We drove down the mountain in silence. The fog followed us halfway to town. Weeks passed, then months. I've never sleepwalked again. But sometimes I wake up at exactly 3:02 a.m., standing beside my bedroom closet at home. My hand already on the knob. And every time I swear I can smell that same damp, sour air seeping through the cracks. Mara doesn't like talking about that weekend. We don't celebrate anniversaries in cabins anymore. I never called the ranger to ask about the couple who left early. I don't want to know if they mentioned the closet too. Some things feel safer when they stay unfinished, but I still think about those boot prints. Because I never told Mara about them. And I still don't know whether they were waiting outside or whether something had been trying to get out. I've always loved the Appalachian mountains in late spring when the fog hangs low in the hollows and the air smells like wet bark and earth that's just starting to warm. That's why I suggested we go. Clara and I had been fighting more than usual that year. Nothing dramatic, just distance. Silence that lingered longer than it should. I thought a weekend deep in the woods outside a small West Virginia town called Red Hollow might fix that. No cell service, no distractions, just us and the sound of the forest settling at night. We drove up a narrow, winding road that looked more like a scar cut into the mountain than an actual route. Mist drifted across the asphalt in thin sheets. The farther we climbed, the fewer houses we saw. Eventually it was just trees, tall skeletal oaks and thick stands of pine, pressing close on both sides. The campground was barely marked. A weathered wooden sign leaned sideways near the gravel entrance. No office, no ranger station, just a metal drop box for payment and a faded map nailed to a post. There were only 2 other campsites occupied, both far down the loop and empty looking. No voices, no smoke from fire pits. Just tents zipped shut and cars speckled with dried mud. We chose a spot near the tree line where the forest thickened quickly into shadow. The ground was damp from recent rain, soft enough that our boots sank slightly with each step. The air smelled of rot, old leaves breaking down into soil. By dusk, fog had rolled in from the valley below. It threaded between the trees and drifted low across the ground like something alive. Even the birds seemed quieter than usual. Clara mentioned it first. "It feels sealed off," she said softly while we set up the tent. I knew what she meant. The mountains have a way of swallowing sound. Once the sun dips, the world shrinks to whatever your flashlight touches. That first night started normal enough. We ate by the fire, listening to insects hum and something larger move far off in the brush, probably deer. When we finally zipped ourselves into the tent, the forest had gone still in that heavy way that makes you aware of your own breathing. Sometime after midnight, Clara shifted beside me. "Did you just say something?" she whispered. I was half asleep. "No." She didn't answer right away. "I heard you," she said finally. "You said my name." The inside of the tent felt colder suddenly. "I didn't," I said. "I've been asleep." She propped herself up on one elbow. I could barely see her outline in the dark. "It sounded like you," she continued, "right outside the tent. Quiet, like you were joking." I felt irritation flicker through me before concern replaced it. "Clara." I didn't get up. She lay back down, but I could feel tension in the way she held her body. We stayed awake for a few minutes, listening. Nothing. Just wind pushing through branches overhead and the slow drip of moisture from leaves. Eventually, we both drifted off again. In the morning, she seemed embarrassed. "Probably just the trees," she said while brushing dirt off her jeans, "or I was dreaming." I nodded, though something about the way she described it stayed with me. Calm, playful, close. We spent the day hiking a narrow trail that followed a shallow creek down into a hollow. The ground there was darker, almost black with moisture. My boots left clear impressions in the mud. On the way back to camp, Clara walked closer to me than usual. That night, the fog came earlier. It wrapped around our tent until the world outside felt erased. The fire wouldn't stay lit. The wood hissed and spat as if it had been soaked from the inside. We went to bed without talking much. I don't know what time it was when Clara grabbed my arm. "He's doing it again," she breathed. My eyes opened instantly. "What?" You're saying my name." I felt a slow wave of unease spread through my chest. "Clara, I'm right here." Her nails pressed into my forearm. "No, outside." I held my breath. At first I heard nothing. Then soft, faint, almost curious. "Daniel?" My name, not Clara's. It came from somewhere behind the trees, maybe 15 feet away, just beyond where our fire had been. The voice was low, steady, not rushed, not threatening, just there. I reached for the flashlight with hands that felt detached from my body. When I unzipped the tent and stepped out, cold air rushed in. The fog was so thick, it swallowed the beam of light almost immediately. "Hello?" I called out, hating how small my voice sounded. Nothing moved. No footsteps, no branches snapping. Just mist curling around tree trunks and the faint smell of damp soil. I walked a slow circle around the tent, sweeping the flashlight across the forest floor. Empty. When I climbed back inside, Clara was staring at me. "You heard it," she said. I nodded. We didn't sleep after that, and sometime before dawn, I began to wonder if coming here had been a mistake. Morning in the mountains can be deceptive. Sunlight broke through the fog in pale strips, turning the trees gold at the edges. For a few minutes, everything looked almost peaceful. Birds resumed their calls. The forest seemed ordinary again. That illusion lasted until Clara stepped out of the tent and stopped moving. "Daniel?" she said quietly. Her voice didn't carry panic, just something flatter. I crawled out beside her. The ground around our tent was soft from 2 days of moisture, mud layered with fallen leaves. And in that mud, clear as pressed clay, were footprints. They formed a wide circle around our tent. Barefoot, larger than mine by at least 2 sizes. Each print sank deep at the heel, as if whoever made them had been standing still for long stretches, watching. My throat tightened. I crouched, studying them. The edges were clean, not washed out by rain. That meant they were recent, very recent. Clara whispered, "You see that too, right?" I nodded. The circle wasn't perfect. In a few places, the prints overlapped slightly, as if the person had paced. But there were no tracks leading away. No clear exit path. They simply faded into thicker ground cover near the tree line. I tried to convince myself it was a prank. Some local kid wandering through campsites at night, but the campground had been nearly empty. And Barefoot? In that cold? I scanned the woods. The trees stood motionless, dense, quiet. "I think we should pack," Clara said. There was no argument left in me. As we dismantled the tent, I kept replaying the voice in my head, the way it said my name. The tone had been familiar, too familiar. On the drive out, the road seemed narrower than before. The fog clung to the valley behind us, like it didn't want to let go. We didn't talk much. That night back home, I couldn't sleep. Around 2 a.m., I woke up standing in the hallway. I don't remember getting out of bed. My bare feet were cold against hardwood floors. I was facing the front door, listening. I told myself it was stress, adrenaline from the weekend. My brain trying to make sense of something it couldn't categorize. Clara hasn't brought up the trip since, but sometimes, when we're lying in bed, she shifts slightly and goes still, like she's listening. And last week, while taking out the trash just after midnight, I thought I heard something from the tree line behind our apartment complex. Soft, curious. "Daniel?" I didn't go looking for it. I went back inside and locked the door. What unsettles me most isn't the footprints. It's that when I think about the voice now, I can't clearly remember what it sounded like. Only that it felt close and patient, like it had all the time in the world. The storm came faster than we expected. 1 minute, the sky over the Appalachian ridge was gray. The next, it had turned a hard, almost purple-black, and sheets of rain were hammering the narrow dirt road up to the campground. My girlfriend, Lila, and I had been planning this trip for months. Just a weekend to escape the city, to hike, to sit by a fire, and drink coffee in silence. But now, trudging through mud and puddles, every tree bowing in the wind, I realized the mountains could be as unforgiving as they were beautiful. The campground itself was nearly empty. The few permanent structures worn and sagging from decades of neglect. Most of the sites were vacant. The caretaker's office was locked, its windows streaked with rain. He had warned us the old storage cabin near the back loop was rarely used, but that it could serve as shelter if the storm worsened. By the time we reached it, the sky had darkened to a deep violet, and the wind shredded the fog into long, trailing fingers across the ground. The cabin smelled of wet rot. Moss clung to the exterior walls, and the wooden steps creaked ominously as we climbed to the doorway. Inside, everything was stale and heavy. A metal stove sat cold in the corner. Shelves sagged under the weight of dust and discarded camping gear. The floor was warped with moisture, and a faint moldy smell lingered under the thick pine scent of the old wood. The thing that caught my attention first was the closet. It was tucked into the corner opposite the door, a tall wooden frame that had seen better decades. The door was secured with a thick padlock, rusted but clearly solid. Its presence was strange, almost unnecessary in a cabin meant to store old tools, tarps, and firewood. Lila brushed past it without comment, placing our bags on the floor and spreading our sleeping pads. We tried to settle in, but the storm was relentless. Rain pounded the roof and whipped the siding into groaning, metallic rhythms. Thunder rolled through the hollow valleys, low and persistent, vibrating through the floorboards beneath us. The wind carried strange, whispering sounds through the trees, branches snapping, leaves scraping together, and somewhere in the distance, the faint cry of an animal. By midnight, the cabin felt smaller than it had an hour ago. Every creak and drip of water echoed in the damp space, and I could feel the weight of the storm pressing against the walls. Then we heard it, a sharp clatter, metal hitting wood. From the closet, Lila froze. "Maybe an animal," she suggested, voice tight. I swallowed. "Yeah, maybe it got in somehow," I said, though it didn't sound convincing even to me. The sound came again, slower this time, deliberate, as if something heavy was shifting inside. I took out my phone and dialed the emergency ranger number posted on the wall. My fingers shook. The padlock's shadow in the candlelight seemed to stretch toward me. The line clicked, and a calm male voice answered. I explained the situation, careful to sound rational. There was a pause. Then the voice went quiet. "The closet?" the ranger finally said, almost too quietly. "Yes, there's something in there. Leave the cabin immediately. Get to the road and wait. Do not go back inside," he said, his tone steady, unnervingly calm. I looked at Leela, eyes wide, hands gripping each other tightly. The storm outside seemed to grow louder, more urgent. We grabbed our gear and scrambled down the steps, mud sucking at our boots, wind tearing at our jackets. When we reached the edge of the clearing where the road met the forest, rain stinging our faces, I noticed the closet. The padlock was hanging open. We hadn't touched it. We stared at it together, hearts hammering. Lila's face was pale, eyes fixed on the open lock. I don't remember speaking for a long while. We both knew we weren't supposed to touch it. Yet the sight of it was worse than anything we could have imagined. I felt the first real gnawing dread of the trip settle in. Something had been inside that closet, and somehow it had left on its own. We waited by the road, shivering in the cold rain, peering at the cabin through sheets of fog and shadow. The storm continued to hammer the ridge, turning the hollow valley into a blur of gray and black. We didn't speak, not really, until the distant rumble of thunder sounded like a warning. Eventually, the wind died slightly, the rain thinning into a steady drizzle. The mist swirled low across the ground, obscuring the forest edges, hiding the dark, wet shapes between the trees. I suggested we cautiously approach the cabin again to check if anything had moved. But Lila shook her head. Her face, pale and drawn, mirrored the unease I felt gnawing in my chest. I circled to the side and noticed footprints, barefoot, pressed deep into the soft mud. They began near the tree line and led directly to the cabin. Uneven, large, not ours. My stomach turned cold. We stepped inside quietly, careful not to disturb anything. The cabin smelled stronger now. Damp wood mixed with an acrid metallic tang that hadn't been there before. The shelves were untouched, the tools in their racks. Nothing obvious was missing. Nothing obvious had been moved. But the closet, the padlock was lying on the floor, metal scratched and smeared. Lila knelt beside it, unable to speak. I lifted the door slightly. Nothing had emerged from it. The inside was empty, dark, and still. Yet there was a faint indentation along the wooden back panel, like something heavy had pressed against it repeatedly. We stayed until dawn, sitting together on the warped floorboards. The storm had passed, leaving fog that clung to the valley floor and seeped into the cabin. Outside, the trees were silent, still, but the memory of the closet lingered, heavier than any sound or shadow. Driving back down the mountain, every turn of the misty road felt like a trap. Every hollow valley and rusted fence post reminded me of the padlock swinging open. We didn't talk much. Words felt inadequate to describe what we had witnessed. Weeks later, I can still feel it. The smell of damp wood, the weight of that heavy padlock, the knowledge that something had been in that cabin that we could not explain. Lila refuses to camp in that region again. I don't blame her. I sometimes wonder what would have happened if we had opened the closet. I try not to think about it too much, but the image comes back. The empty interior, the indentation, the sense of a presence that didn't belong to this world, yet had acted as if it did. We never reported it further. The ranger's calm warning was enough to cement in my mind that we were not meant to investigate. There's a kind of terror in being told something isn't safe to see, and realizing it, perhaps, was never meant for you to witness. The cabin still exists in my memory as a place of quiet dread. Even now, when I smell damp wood or hear a metal clang, my mind returns to that locked closet, the padlock swinging open, and the understanding that some doors, even those you cannot see clearly, are better left closed. I carry it with me. A small, unshakable weight in the back of my mind. Something I cannot explain. Something that was very real.
If today's story touched a quiet corner of your heart, if for a moment you felt like someone was standing close to you, then remember you are not alone. To hear more terrifying whisper in the depth of the night, subscribe to our channel Night Mare Whisper, because every story is not just about fear, it leaves behind a feeling. Thanks for watching, and one more thing, we'll meet again tomorrow night when the darkness has grown a little deeper.